Hi, this is Peter from Sensel, and I want to show you some of the different ways of working with Apple's Logic Pro 10 and the Sensel Morph. I'm going to show you working with the different overlays so that you can have one instrument track for each overlay. I also want to show you how to map the knobs on the music production controller so that you can control lots of different areas of Logic Pro and just really make it more versatile. I'm also going to show you some of the gotchas that you may or may not experience. And finally, I want to cover how to use MPE and the Morph keyboard, the piano keyboard, and how to get sort of the most life out of that using MPE and Logic Pro 10. So the first thing I want to start off with is the first thing you see here, and that is the Sensel app. We're going to need this to modify some of the default settings in our overlays. So I'm going to go ahead and add an overlay for each, just the standard built-in overlay. I already have the standard built-in overlay loaded for the drum pads. However, I did make one change where I changed these octave shift or session shift arrows to a keyboard overlay, to keyboard type. So they send an arrow up and down. Using those buttons will now just let me do, let me go ahead and switch tracks in Ableton, sorry Apple, in Apple's Logic. So that's kind of a nice, convenient thing that we're going to do on all of the overlays. You can see I've got that set to keyboard type and then up and down. So I'm going to go ahead and add an overlay, and I'm just going to add the standard music production overlay, MP MIDI that shows up here. So I'll show you how I did that keyboard modification. I went ahead and just selected the type, changed it to keyboard, and changed the key to up on the left key. And it takes a minute to find that. All right, so almost there. Number 82, and this one I'm going to set to keyboard and set that to, I believe, 83. Not quite, down, 81. And I want to turn the LED on for those so they actually will blink the LEDs on the Morph. That's the first change I want to make. The other thing I want to do, let's go ahead and show this overlay on the controller, so you don't have to have it on there to edit it. The other thing I want to do is take a look at this. We notice that the default MIDI settings send CCs for after pressure, which is kind of neat in a lot of cases. However, not really what we want to do in Logic because that can cause some problems. So I'm going to do the hold down the command key so I can select multiples. You may or may not know this trick. It is a great time saver. So you hold down the command key and just start clicking on controls, and then you can change settings, the common settings on those controls to the same thing. So in this case, I want them all to send channel aftertouch, which is just a particular type of MIDI message. And that's going to send on channel 2, so that's fine. And that is pretty much the only modification I want to make. I'm going to go ahead and send that map to Morph. And now that's loaded. Similarly for the piano overlay, we want to go ahead and add the overlay and add the piano MIDI overlay. And on this, we'll also want to change these to the keyboard. Up and down arrows. So we have that nice ability to change tracks directly from the controller. And everything else here is fine. It sends on channel 1. We don't have to worry about after pressure. If we wanted to add it, we could, because you can use that in some synths. I'm just going to leave it as is. I'm going to send that map to Morph. Now the other thing I want to do on the music production MIDI overlay, I'm going to change these two keys so these send MIDI notes, and you'll see why I do that soon. I don't want to send any pitch bend on that. I want to send the LED, no after pressure, and I'm just going to make it the lowest possible note. And similarly, I'll do the same thing over here. Just make it the second possible lowest note, take off pitch bend, and turn on the LED. So these are just sitting MIDI notes. We'll use that. I'm going to go ahead and send that map to Morph. The piano MIDI, I'm going to send the map to Morph. And I guess we're ready to go to Logic. Okay, the first thing I want to show you is how to do some controller mappings in Logic for these 8 knobs. As you can see, I'll go ahead and open this window so you know what to open. I will close that. What you want to do is you want to go to the Logic Pro X, Control Surfaces, and Controller Assignments. Also, Shift Option K will bring this up. You can see I have a zone already set up for the Sensel music production overlay. And I have 2 modes. So what does all that mean? What does that all mean? Let's delete it and find out. So I'm going to go ahead and add a zone. And this is more for posterity's sake. We could just use no zone. And then the modes, what I want to do is when you're using instruments, I want to be able to use these to control the smart buttons. And that you can show that in Logic using the B key. So that just brings up these controls that are sort of specific to whatever synth you're using or whatever plugin. And then I also want to be able to use them as a mixer so I can control all of these levels on these 8 tracks. So I'm going to create 2 modes. The first mode is mix mode. And that was odd. I will call this mix mode. And I'm going to add one more, and I'm going to call that instrument mode. So now we have these 2 modes, and I can do different assignments using the same controllers. It's sort of like different layers. Then the no mode is going to be important, and that's where these buttons come in, because I'll use those buttons to switch the mode. So first, instrument mode, what I want to do is use learn to map these controls to the instruments. I'm going to go ahead and select electric piano because that has a nice group of 8 knobs that I can map. And there's an easy way to do this in Logic. So I'm going to hit learn and go ahead and move this dial and then touch this first knob here. Now I'm going to keep it in learn mode and go to the very bottom right knob and learn for that. And now when I exit learn mode, Logic is going to say, oh, I kind of seems like what you want to do is fill all this out. Yes, I do want to fill that out. And now it's created mappings for all of these knobs, for all of these controls on here on the overlay. We can take a look and see. So this is sending control change 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, blah, blah, blah. And that is 9. That's the first one I did. So it's 9 through 16. Now there is a problem. Notice when I move this, this is a Quirk of Logic, and maybe someone out there has a better idea. But when I do this learn mode for a CC, it just puts it in this weird thing where it's switching between values. It's not rotating the knob smoothly. That's because of how the value is interpreted by Logic. What we want to do is set this to unsigned and scaled. Now it's going to rotate as you might expect. Sadly, it did that for all of them. So I'm just going to use my arrow keys and quickly make these all unsigned, scaled, and you can watch this while I'm doing this, or you can follow along at home, which I'm sure you're doing. The nice thing about this is that we have it in posterity here for posterity's sake, and you can always refer to it and follow step by step if you need to, if things aren't working right on your end. Because I started from a blank slate here, so everything is going to be, you know, there's nothing special and there's no tricks happening here. So now we can see all of our knobs are turning, and you'll notice like a slight delay. So if I start here on this knob, this release knob here does not really move. It doesn't move until I catch up to its current value in the middle, and now I grab hold of it, and now I can turn it freely. So I can go ahead and change the sound, add some distortion. And so I've got a lot of control over that sound. I can even change the type of piano it is. So that's pretty powerful. And you think that maybe it's not so great because these are maybe specifically latched to the electric piano, and that's all I can control. But fortunately, Logic is a little bit smarter than that. So when I use these keys to change my instrument, it's going to change the knobs that it controls. So it's a little bit smarter. It's not just a direct mapping. It's actually being a little bit smart about it and just saying I'm going to map to the first 8 parameters that show up in the smart knobs. And so you can even control the drums if you would like. All right, so that's pretty powerful. We can control the instruments. Now we want to be able to control the levels of the instruments, sort of making a little 8-channel mixer here. So what I'm going to go to is mix mode now. We have no controls assigned here. And again, I'm going to put it in learn mode, select a parameter, and go ahead and latch it. And again, it did that same sort of irritating thing where it's not in the right mode. I will put it in scaled and unsigned, and now I have control over. Let's try that again. Did I mention that Logic can be somewhat quirky? Yes, I did. All right, well, that's boring. I am still in learn mode is the problem. All right, take it out of learn mode, and now I will make this change. So you can learn from my mistakes, which is, I'm sure, what you want to be watching. All right, here we go. We're controlling channel 1's volume with control change to 9, so this is sending out CC9. Here's an easy way to do this. I'm not going to learn everything. Another thing you can do is copy a control and then paste it 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times. So here we have, we're controlling, these are all the same. They're controlling fader bank 1 with that same controller. So what I want to do is I want to change this to fader bank 2 and change this to 0A, which is hex for 10. So now I have control of track 2. And we can do that for all the rest of these. And I will go ahead and change the track numbers in succession. And now I will control 0A, 0B, zero C, zero D, 0E. And if you're not sure what the hex is, at least it translates to decimal down here. And 0F is going to be 15. And finally, after 0F comes 10, which is 16. Now that we have control over the mixer in mixer mode, and we have control over the instruments in instrument mode, we need to figure out how to change the mode from the morph. So I'm going to use, these are already changing the instruments on the tracks. I'm going to use these 2 buttons, which I've reassigned to MIDI notes. So I'm going to go to no mode, So now with no mode, we want to go ahead and add a control, and this is going to be the class mode change. We want it to switch to instrument mode. Input, of course, is the Sensel morph, and we can use learn mode to select that note. And what we can do, I'm going to delete this other one. Just go ahead and copy and paste here and make this 902. Just edit it manually. We know it's in succession. And now I'm going to make that mixer. So we have these two buttons that will switch the mode. And we also need, of course, to change the type to direct and unsigned. And similarly here we'll make this direct and unsigned. So these are the totally non-obvious things that a lot of other programs you wouldn't have to worry about. So this is kind of powerful that you can manipulate this stuff, but it's also very inconvenient when you're just trying to get something done. So the crux of the matter is, now that I press this button to put it in mixer mode, I can control volumes on tracks, and now I can put it in instrument mode, and of course that will control the instrument. So that's super powerful. We can very easily assign these to different areas of the program depending on what we are working on at the time. So that covers the MIDI mapping aspect of this tutorial. There's obviously a lot of other things you can do, but that's a great start. Now the next thing I want to show is sort of unrelated to this, but it's very it could be very useful in like a live situation where you want an overlay to be associated with a particular track. So let's say you want this to I'll go ahead and put it in mixer mode and turn that up, to always play these electronic drums you have loaded in track 1. And that's what you want from this 4x4 grid. And let's say you want to be able to play a bass, let's say this Hoover bass, with these. These are sending on channel 2, these are sending on channel 3, so it should be possible. But out of the box in Logic, it's not obvious how to do this. So let's go back into history and open up with Command 0. That's in Window Open MIDI Environment, the environment window. What we can do here is we can do our channel parsing. And what we want to do is create a new physical input. And what this is physical MIDI input is what it's referring to. And so you can see it has all of the MIDI controls that I have lined up in my system. Clearly I have a lot of things going on here. So what I want to do is I want to take the Sensel morph output, and then I want to split it according to channel, or parse the channel. So that would be a channel splitter object. So I can take this little box. These little arrows, each one somehow corresponds to these different names. For the sake of expediency, I'm just going to use sum. But what you would want to do is find the arrow that is actually referring to the Sensel morph. It may or may not be one of these. I don't want to get it wrong here because that would just waste your time. So what we want to do here is not take this sum channel out of here. We want to take channel 1 from the morph and fix that to EXS 808, my electronic drum kit. Oh, that's not what I want to do. I want that to go to a different one. So I'm going to take the eraser tool and erase that connection. Let's go back to my pointer tool. And that was quite educational. Channel 1 is the piano keyboard. And let's just go ahead and map that to the clav. And channel 2 is what the 4x4 on the music production is outputting, this area. And channel 3 is the bass. So already we should be able to play my electronic drums and the bass on this channel split device. And when I throw on the piano overlay, it's playing the clav instrument. And finally on channel 10, which I'm going to count backwards, 16, 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10. Yes, it's very fussy. But it's worth it because now I will always have an acoustic drum kit on my drum pads. So to demonstrate again, quickly and instantly, changing instruments when I change the overlays. So that's pretty slick, and I still have my previous mappings, so I can go ahead and mix my levels as I desire. Doesn't matter what the channel is for that stuff. Great. So that is a nice way to approach that. Now, the next thing I'm going to show you is using MPE, or MIDI Polyphonic Expression, using the piano overlay. And you may have seen some videos of this type of stuff. What it allows us to do is do pitch bend, going horizontal, and we can add some expression going up and down, as well as pushing down and using the pressure sensitivity of the Morph. So I'm going to go ahead and erase all of this stuff that I did in the environment, because that's just going to get in the way of MPE stuff. So it's really kind of a separate concern. So the MPE stuff that we're really interested in is, of course, synthesizers. You can apply it to other things, of course, but it's probably most commonly done with synthesizers. So I've got a couple of the powerful ones here, Alchemy and Sculpture. What I first need to do is go back to the Sensel app, and I need to load an overlay, the Piano MPE overlay. And what this does is it already sends different notes for each key, as well as the channel aftertouch for pressure, and pitch bend for X, and CC74 for your Y. Now it's totally standard. If you want to modify those values, you can, but no guarantee about what's going to happen. And also Y is set to absolute, so if you have it set to a particular filter, it's going to be filtered differently depending on the length of where you press the key. So I'm going to send that map to Morph. And also, we probably want to change these at some point to do the trickery of being able to change tracks. But I'm not going to do that right now. So we have some pitch bend going on there. It's very subtle, but I'd like to get this action going, and I'd like to get that after pressure going. So let's open up Alchemy in the channel strip, get that synth window UI open, and it's very big and impressive. Nice clean design. So in order to map things, we can select a parameter in the interface. I want the filter to be applied not with aftertouch, which is currently doing very delicately. What I want to do is I want to map the cutoff to Control C, which is already set to CC74, which is this important element. The depth is pretty high. So now we're bringing that filter, opening up that filter. We could also make it so it would close the filter, which is maybe not dramatic here. What I want to do is and we can make it sound a little bit more interesting. All right, so that's great. The aftertouch, maybe we could apply that to volume. I'll just do that to the master volume. So again, MIDI, note property, aftertouch, on, depth, And you can see how I'm modulating with pressure the master volume. So that is how you are able to get those per note controls for Alchemy. And I might as well show you Sculpture too, which is even harder to do because the interface is really, hey, let's not judge, it's different. So what we want to do here is there's these little tabs down here that are not obvious. And then there's also the MIDI controller assignments down here. Similar, oh, that's the other thing. And same in Alchemy. I neglected to tell you this. But you want to use this little arrow down here and set MIDI mono mode to on. And that allows for per note changes in the filtering, etc., or whatever expressions you have. Otherwise, it just does it all at once. And this is also where you would assign Control-C to 74 bright if it wasn't already set that way. So that little arrow is pretty important. And we have that on Sculpture too. So again, with bass channel 1, this has a bit more dramatic pitch bend. With that mode on. Let's go to Sculpture so we can listen to this one. So we've got this MIDI mono mode set. Control, we want to be able to make CC74 available. So I'm just going to make that Control B. So now that's available here in the controller assignments. And we have vibrato depth control is set to aftertouch, which sounds good. We'll go ahead to this where we can actually map what Control A and Control B that we set up here to do. So I can set a target. I need to turn it on, set a target to, again, filter cutoff is always a nice one. Now it's not doing anything. We need to increase how much it's going to affect it. Oh, there we go. So it takes some monkeying around. You need to mess around with the depth of the effect here. And you also need to make sure your cutoff is set to a base value that is appropriate for your design, and you need to choose the right filter. So there's several things that you need to consider when you're mapping your MPE controls. Similarly, aftertouch is going to vibrato. There's a way to set how much that's working, and that's in this vibrato tab that's very tiny. And this knob right here, this lever, will affect how much it's going. So as I press and release and press down, you can make it very dramatic. Or just very subtle. And it's hard to see how much I'm pressing down on this, but you know, it's with a reasonable amount of force. You can adjust that as you feel comfortable. So that is using MPE and having per note controls over the filters and vibrato and all sorts of weird things. So there's really a lot of access to designing sounds with your fingers, instead of having to use knobs and levers. It's a pretty exciting new way of working with all of these synthesizers. So that is sort of a nutshell, how to work with Logic, how to do interesting things in Logic using the Sensel Morph and all the different music overlays. I hope this was not boring and hopefully very informative. Until the next tutorial, signing off.